Picking the right neighborhood in Atlanta could be the difference between loving your life or totally regretting your move. Today, I'm going to take you through my last 10 relocations. I'm going to tell you who the client was, what they were really looking for, and how we found them the perfect neighborhood. Hey, welcome back to Living in Atlanta. It's great to have you here. My name is Mark, and I help people find their place in the Atlanta area. So in my career, I have helped so many different types of people relocate to the Atlanta area, from states all over the country, even out of the country, to in-state relocations for people living in other places in Georgia. And by far, the number one challenge that these clients face is picking the right neighborhood. Because the reality is there are a lot of different neighborhoods around Atlanta that could check all the boxes of what you're looking for. But if you're trying to find the perfect home in a huge geographic area, it's going to be very difficult to move quickly and move effectively. For example, let's take two neighborhoods like Sewanee and Noonan. Now, both of these are good neighborhoods. They're safe, good for families, have good public schools, and you can buy a home there on a reasonable budget. But these are in opposite directions from one another. And not only are there going to be major lifestyle differences living in these two areas, but when doing an actual home search, there's no way we can effectively look for homes in each of these areas and potentially move very quickly on a hot new listing that comes up. So one of the biggest ways my team and I provide clients value is really understanding what that person or family is looking for and identify 1 to 3 neighborhoods in a certain area that are most likely to fit all of those needs. And the beauty of narrowing it down in this way is not only can we move much more quickly in terms of seeing something and putting an offer in, but we spend more time in these areas, we get more familiar with them, and we gain confidence when the time comes to pull the trigger. So I thought it would be helpful to go through 10 recent relocations, clients that I've actually helped move here from other states and a few from in-state, and share with you a little bit about the client, what was most important to them, and how we landed on a certain neighborhood that worked best for their needs. But before we dive into that, let's talk about the basic framework for narrowing this search down. It may seem obvious, but a lot of people overlook it and get caught up in the details. So what is that framework? Well, everyone has a max budget. There's a budget that you simply can't go beyond. So that is one major parameter. The other is size. Everyone has minimum size requirements that'll work for them and their family. So that's another major parameter. And because each neighborhood has a price range for a certain size house, these two factors alone are going to narrow our search quite a bit. The next two major factors to consider are commute and lifestyle. Many people either will need to commute to work either every day or a few days a week, or they'll have another thing they need to commute to. It could be family, it could be a major amenity like the airport because you travel often for work or for leisure, but most people have something, some landmark, whether it be work or an amenity that they want to be a certain distance from, and that's going to narrow it down quite a bit. A side note on this is if you have nothing that you need to be close to, that's great. It's going to provide more flexibility, but also it's going to be a little harder to narrow down. And the fourth parameter is going to be lifestyle. Everyone is looking for a different vibe in the place that they live. Some people are city folk. They want to be in the heart of the city with lots of things to do. Some people want to be in suburbia. They're raising a family. They want a safe, family-friendly environment with good public schools, and some of my clients want a real rural experience. They want to be far away from the city. Maybe they want a large plot of land. So everyone has different lifestyle requirements. So I just wanted to touch on those 4 major parameters, okay? It would be really beneficial for you to just simply sit and think about, what is my max budget? What is the minimum size requirements I need? Is there anything that I need to be worried about commuting to on a regular basis? And what kind of lifestyle am I looking for myself or for my family? That being said, let's dive into 10 real life scenarios of people I've helped relocate here and see how we found them the perfect neighborhood. Now, please note, I am changing the names of these clients for anonymity's sake. I'm not going to share their actual pictures or actual address of the home that they purchased, but the scenarios are completely true, okay? I went back and looked at 10 recent transactions, and I found situations where we help people relocate from out of state or in state, but these are the actual situations. All the anecdotes and all the descriptions actually happen. These are real life clients. I don't have that good of imagination, so really the only thing that's different here is going to be the actual names of the people. So let's bring up our first family, the Smiths. Now, the Smiths were a lovely couple, husband, wife, and young son. They relocated from the New York area, and actually they originally rented, right? And so they contacted me me the husband works in Midtown, which is in the heart of Atlanta, and they didn't want to buy right away. They wanted to rent to get comfortable and figure out where the right neighborhood would eventually be for them. So our initial relationship was helping them find a rental. We found them a great house rental in Virginia Highlands, which is a very desirable in-town neighborhood that is right next to Midtown, where the husband was commuting. He was actually commuting to Ponce City Market, which is more in the Ponce Highlands area, but it's very close to Midtown. It's right in the heart of the city. So Virginia Highlands was perfect. It's a family-friendly area. It was an easy commute to Ponce City Market. They loved it, right? They got a great old historic house that they rented out for, I think it was around $3,500 a month. They loved it, but they lived there for a year and it was time to buy. Okay, so that was the journey. They had spent a year here, they knew what they liked and didn't like, and now it was time to find them a home. But we needed to find a place where the husband could still commute to Ponce City Market a few days a week, right? So that was one of our major parameters. The other major parameter was an $800,000 max budget. We needed at least 4 beds, 3 baths, 2,500 square feet. And of course, family with kids, it had to be in a very safe area where the wife would feel safe, where the kid would feel safe, where the wife would feel safe, where it's a safe place to raise children. And we needed really great public schools. That was one of the most important things to them. They wanted high quality education for their child as he grew up. So this is obviously a very healthy budget, okay? They really had the pick of the litter in terms of what neighborhood they wanted to purchase a house in. You're just gonna get different variables in terms of what kind of finishes you're gonna get, the condition, the size, and whatnot. We could have looked at a place like Alpharetta, for instance, which with a high budget, you wanna be in the suburbs, that's usually one of the first places I'll talk with clients about. However, that would not have worked for this commute. So this commute really narrowed it down more than anything else, okay? Because if you're gonna be in Alpharetta commuting to Ponce City Market, that's gonna be an hour plus at least. And to do that multiple days a week would just not be tenable. Now, the two main places we looked, the big decision that we had to make for the Smiths was in town or suburban, right? We were looking at two main places. We were looking at the Kirkwood area, which is another in-town neighborhood that you can do great with on that budget. It would have been a very easy commute to Ponce City Market. Now, they were also open to the Virginia Highlands purchasing where they were renting, but there weren't a lot of options on the market. The homes there tend to be much older, and so we didn't feel like that was going to be the best fit. So we were looking at either Kirkwood or East Cobb. Now, you've heard me talk about East Cobb quite a bit. Very high quality public schools, some of the highest quality public schools in all of Metro Atlanta. Now, the unique thing about East Cobb is that it is in the suburbs, it is safe, it's got incredibly high quality public schools, it's very easy to get into town, which is very much the case for many places in Cobb County like Smyrna, Marietta. East Cobb's not that far away, and so you can get away with a commute to a Ponce City Market, typically within 45 minutes depending on what traffic is doing. So depending on where you need to be in the city, the East Cobb to Atlanta commute really is not one of the worst commutes that you'd find. Now, because of how your dollar will do different things in this area, in Kirkwood we were looking at pretty much new construction recently built within the last couple years, where in East Cobb we were looking slightly older homes, well maintained, some updates, but definitely not new construction at that price point. So what did we land on for the Smiths? Well, we found them a great home in East Cobb for $755,000. We found them this beautiful home with 5 beds, 4 baths, over 2,500 square feet. It had a beautiful pool area. It had a sauna. Really gorgeous home. Now, this was a slightly older home. It was built in the 80s, so there were definitely things the seller needed to address in our negotiations. But at the end of the day, I really feel like they made a great decision. They're going to be in East Cobb, safe, outstanding public schools, perfect environment to raise a family, but the husband will be able to commute into Ponce City Market a few days a week without driving him crazy. So at the end of the day, the decision for them was really the in-town neighborhoods, although they can be great, there are plenty of safe ones. This particular family wanted just a little bit more of a suburban environment. They didn't want to have any questions about safety or schools, so they played it safe, so to speak, and went with East Cobb, which I think was a great decision. Recent client number 2, we're going to call Sally. Now, Sally did not come here from another state. Sally is a local. She lived in Hateville. Okay, she was a younger woman, a hairdresser, and she was actually house hacking. She was getting into real estate investing. So she had her property in Hateville, which is a fantastic place to own real estate. She was renting out by the room to offset her mortgage costs. She wanted to scale her rental portfolio. She wanted to add another rental that she could live in and continue to rent out these homes by the room and collect cash flow. So I was really excited to help this person. I love working with investors. And so we had to figure out for Sally, what can you buy that's going to be in a good area that's growing where you feel safe and that you're going to have low occupancy, good rental rates, and it can't break the bank. Okay, her budget was about $315,000. So in terms of parameters right there, that's going to limit it quite a bit, obviously. Now, I could talk all day about investors and all the things you need to think about to determine what area you're going to focus on. But whenever you have someone who is going to be house hacking, aka living in the house that they're going to be renting out, it does make the process much easier. And so in determining the neighborhood for her, we knew we wanted to stay in town. We didn't want her to be too far away from her current rental in Hapeville. As a single woman, it had to be a safe area that she felt safe walking around, and it couldn't be too far from her work, which is very much in town. So what did we land on? We landed on Hapeville. Okay, she got another property, another primary residence that she will rent out by the room in the same neighborhood. It's a great excuse to talk about Hapeville for real estate investors, okay? She was able to purchase a home under $300,000 inside the perimeter, minutes away from the airport, in a safe community known for the arts, and also an area that is growing tremendously, has a lot of big companies headquartered in the area. And what I loved about this deal was we were actually able to find a home that was listed as a 2-bed, 2.5-bath home. But when we got there, what we found was there was 2 additional rooms that could easily be rented out. Okay, so we're looking at, in reality, more of a 4-bedroom home being sold for closer to a 2-bedroom price, just because that's how the listing agent and seller decided to market it. So there was some great inherent value there. The other thing I loved was the condition, right? One thing I advise, especially investor clients, is that don't get into major rehabs. Try to stick to cosmetic rehabs. Unless you have a lot of experience with rehabs and construction, you've got great contractor contacts, it could be really risky to dive into something too significant. Now with this home in particular, it was maintained really well despite being an older home in an older neighborhood. All the repairs she's looking to do are going to be essentially cosmetic. There was some flooring things, there was some paint, some vanities, some landscaping, but nothing significant with the major systems. So to me, this was a perfect scenario for an investor client looking to house hack, okay? They got a great deal on a home. Sub $300,000 in the perimeter right now is really good, especially in an area like Hapeville, which is very desirable. So we got sub 300, she got a 4-bedroom house for the price of a 2-bedroom house. And with just a little bit of work, she's gonna be able to fix this place up, get great rates for rental for each room, and she's going to be cash flowing quite a bit on her 2 properties. Plus, she's in an area that she already knows, she feels safe in, it's got a reasonable commute to work. So I think this was a great decision on her part. All right, next up we have the Johnsons. The Johnsons are a couple that came from Denver, Colorado, relocating to the Atlanta area for work. Husband's a pilot, wife is an architect. They were selling their home in Denver and they wanted to be in the heart of the city in Atlanta. They wanted the in-town lifestyle. The husband, as a pilot, would need easy access to Hartsfield-Jackson Airport. And they really wanted a place with good walkability, close to a lot of fun things to do. They had an $800,000 budget. They did not need a huge home. They only needed at least 3 beds, 2 baths, and 1,800 square feet. So that gave them a lot of flexibility. You can do very well with this budget inside the perimeter when you don't need a large home necessarily. So there were a lot of great in-town neighborhoods to consider with the Johnsons. I mean, we talked about Grant Park, Inman Park, we talked about Morningside, we talked about getting something really nice on the west side of town because your dollar goes further there. But one of the deciding factors for them was they wanted a newer construction home. They weren't really into the really older antique style homes that would probably need a much more work than average. They wanted something that was buttoned up, and not only buttoned up, but had modern finishes, something that did not need any work and that was ready to go. And because being in town and having high walkability was important to them, they were open to an attached option. So we were mainly focused on the most popular in-town neighborhoods. We looked at many homes in the Kirkwood area, even put in a few offers in that neighborhood, but ultimately the neighborhood that worked out perfectly for the Johnsons ended up being Edgewood. Now, Edgewood is a great in-town neighborhood, and it's close to everything. There's really not anything it's far from. It's in the heart of the city. There's good restaurants around Edgewood. There's the Beltline around Edgewood, and there's other fantastic neighborhoods adjacent to Edgewood. And the best part is we were able to find a home built within the last few years. It was an attached option. It was a 3-level townhome, 3 beds, 3 baths, over 2,000 square feet. It was beautiful. It had a lot of privacy in the back. They had a balcony with, there was no homes built in the back. It was just a bunch of kudzu and trees. So it was a great, they had their fenced in yard, which they could use, but in terms of views and privacy, it was working out perfectly for them. And even better, it had an attached garage, which is pretty rare this far in town. And the Johnsons love Edgewood. They love the neighborhood. They're close to really great restaurants in town. There's a bunch of different places they can walk to. There's a bunch of development in the area, so the home values are going to continue to go up here. It's generally very safe, so the wife can feel safe, going out for a walk by herself. And the house itself was practically brand new, so they could move right in and be extremely comfortable. So far, this has been a great decision for the Johnsons. Next up, let's talk about my clients, Kate and Ashley. This is a beautiful young couple from Brooklyn who relocated to the Atlanta area to be closer to family. And I had a great time helping them identify a neighborhood and finally find a house. Now, Kate and Ashley had a budget of $450,000. They only needed a 3-2 or more. They were good with about 1,500 square feet or more. So they were really flexible in terms of the space. They did want to be in town. Coming from Brooklyn, they're used to walkability, having a lot of great things to do close by. So we needed to identify what were the in-town neighborhoods that were going to work for Kate and Ashley on this budget, where being two women, they would obviously want to feel safe walking around. But also, this isn't a super high budget, okay? $450 I think is a good starter budget inside the perimeter in Atlanta these days, but it's not going to get you in a Buckhead or Midtown, at least for a detached option, right? So we needed to find that trade-off. How can we be in town but feel safe, have a lot of great things to do? And one of my favorite areas to look at for clients like this is the west side, particularly around the Beltline. Now, you heard me talk about the west side all the time. Depending on what your tolerance is for city living, you may be really terrified of the west side, or if you really know the city of Atlanta, you know how much it's growing and what the future potential is. The reality is, as I said many times before, things change rapidly from street to street in Atlanta. There's no one bad neighborhood that you should completely avoid. Every neighborhood has little pockets, whether they be good or bad. So it's really important that you work with someone who knows these areas in detail to give you information, right? So we were looking on the west side around the Beltline. And to be honest, there's some neighborhoods that I personally just wouldn't feel safe living in this point. You've got neighborhoods like Dixie Hills or Oakland City, which, the values there are certainly going to continue to grow, but the crime statistics are definitely much higher than average, as those aren't areas that I personally feel safe living in. So, we've really got to identify where we're going to focus on, where we're not going to focus on. There were other neighborhoods around there that I love, right? Mosley Park, Ashview Heights, parts of West End. Okay, so there are neighborhoods that are kind of on one side of development and neighborhoods that haven't quite made it yet, right? So where did we find for Kate and Ashley? Well, we landed on West End, and this was really close to the Beltline. So I think it was a really smart financial choice, but we found them a beautiful older home. It was definitely more of a historic home that had been maintained and renovated over the years. It ended up being around $435,000. It had 4 beds, 2 baths, and over 2,000 square feet. So great size home. And this was very much in town, in the heart of the city, walkable to the Beltline, great amenities nearby. This is a rapidly changing area, right? So, like many areas in Atlanta, not a place you want to leave valuable things in your car or leave your car unlocked. But we're talking about city living, right? And these are people who come from another major city, so they're going to be more likely to be comfortable with city living in a place like Atlanta. And the reality is, Kate and Ashley now own Beltline adjacent property at a very good price. So, they're going to live there for however long. They're going to be close to a lot of great things to do. The value of their home is going to rise more sharply than many other places around Atlanta, right? If you have the tolerance for city living, you have your smarts about you, you don't get scared off by, interesting looking characters that you see around town, you will be rewarded for being early in a neighborhood by the sharp increase in values. But at the end of the day, if you're working with a budget of around $450,000 or less and you really want to be in town, West End is not the only place I would suggest looking, but I'm always going to suggest somewhere around the Beltline because of how important of an anchor for property values that it is, and what an amazing amenity it is. To be able to walk to different neighborhoods, bike to them, scooter, whatever you want to do, is not something many Atlantans can do. So I think they made a great choice. All right, next up we have the Peters family. Now the Peters were a beautiful family relocating from California. Husband, wife, 2 kids, relocating for work. They needed an area that's going to be safe for the family, great public schools, great atmosphere for the kids to grow up in. They needed at least 4 beds, 2 baths, and their max budget was $550,000. Now, they were both remote workers, so this created a lot of flexibility in where we could look, right? And not only were they remote, they didn't care how far from the city of Atlanta they were going to be, right? So we could go anywhere in Georgia. So this is one of those cases where we've got to find some ways to narrow it down. Now, because the Peters were so flexible in terms of the area, we really focused on lifestyle. One of the things that they said to me is they're outdoors enthusiasts. They like being in parks. They like hiking. They like being outdoors with kids. They want their kids to be outdoors as much as possible. Now, when I heard that, I immediately thought of Gwinnett County. I've talked about it on the channel before. Gwinnett County, in addition to generally having really good public schools, good diversity, good value, has one of the best park systems, not only in Georgia, but in the entire Southeast. So one of my first suggestions was for us to spend some time driving around the Gwinnett area to see if it had the right feel for them. We looked at areas like Lawrenceville, Duluth, all the way up to Beaufort by Lake Lanier. But what did we end up settling on? Sewanee. Now, you've heard me talk about Sewanee before, but this is a suburb more so than any other that I can think of that's oriented for families. It's like all the development they do in Sewanee has families in mind. You know, they have a downtown area that's centered around a major green space and amphitheater with shopping. Anytime you go over there, there's kids everywhere, right? So Sewanee ended up being the perfect place for a family, especially with their budget. You can do pretty well in Sewanee at $550. It's not going to be a new construction home, but the home we found him was built within the last 20 years. It was in great shape. It was in a beautiful little community with other kids, you know, playing in the houses as we were doing the showing. But this is an area in Sewanee where the kids are going to get a great public education. You're not going to have to worry about any safety issues. If you do want to come into Atlanta for a date night, that's only going to be about 45 minutes or so, half the way to North Georgia, right? You're closer to Lake Lanier, you're closer to the North Georgia mountains. So for outdoors people, those are some serious amenities to consider. You're in Gwinnett County. Fantastic park systems. Everywhere you turn is another fantastic park. So we found the Peters a beautiful home for $539,000 in the heart of Sewanee. I just spoke with them the other week, and they're loving it. The kids have made friends with the neighbors. The schools they're very happy with, the safety, the lifestyle. So I really love Sewanee. I talk about it any chance I get. But if you're not as concerned being so close to Atlanta, you want to be in a suburb that really focuses on families, and you have a similar type of budget, you definitely need to consider Sewanee. All right, next up we have Ashley and Nicole. This is another young couple that I helped relocate from Florida. If you haven't figured it out by now, my most common relocations are going to be Florida, Texas, New York, and California, with some Louisiana and Illinois sprinkled in. But Ashley and Nicole were moving here for work purposes. They had a $500,000 budget and they wanted to be in town. All right, there's no kids involved. It's a younger couple. They wanted a lot of fun things to do. And they also really wanted to be in an emerging neighborhood, in a neighborhood that's going through changes, where they could get involved in the community, but also be in the heart of the city with lots of things to do close by. So whenever I have clients talking about in-town neighborhoods with high walkability, lots of things to do, these are city folk that aren't going to be scared of city living. Again, we look at Beltline adjacent neighborhoods. So what was a perfect neighborhood for Ashley and Nicole? It ended up being Adair Park. Now, Adair Park is slightly south of downtown Atlanta, but this is another Beltline neighborhood, okay? In fact, the entrance to the Beltline was just down the street from Ashley and Nicole, which is really significant. You're talking about having one of the most important amenities in the city at your fingertips. Additionally, the house we found for them, they absolutely fell in love with. It was one of these older homes with the classic wraparound southern porch. It was directly across from an actual park. It had these beautiful 10-foot plus ceilings. It was in really good shape for such an old home, and we were able to get a purchase price of $499,000. And they've absolutely loved it so far. They've loved the neighborhood, really haven't had any issues, and they've got a lot of great things to do close by. So, as you can tell, when I get a younger couple that's in the $400,000 to $500,000 price point and they want to be close to a lot of fun things to do, we definitely talk about Beltline neighborhoods. Now, I don't want you to get the impression that's you have to be on the west side or you have to be around the Beltline. No. With that budget, we can go further north, right? We can look at a Buckhead or a Midtown. It's just probably going to be a townhome or a condo, right? And not everyone is okay with that. We could also look on the east side, right? For any of my clients who like ranches and they like larger parcels and they have that budget, but they want to be in town, we're definitely looking at an East Lake Terrace area, right? Tons of ranches on the east side, larger parcels, less dense. So again, it's really going to come down to lifestyle if we have a lot of flexibility in terms of location. All right, next up we have Brooke. Now, Brooke was another local. She actually found me through my TikTok channel, and Brooke was renting in Brookhaven. But Brooke was a young professional. She had a boyfriend, but no kids. Her work was completely remote, so there was a lot of flexibility there, but she definitely wanted to be in town. And of course, as a younger woman, she wants to feel safe when she's walking around her neighborhood. Now, Brooke really wanted a lot of fun things to do close by to her, preferably in walking distance, and one of the first neighborhoods we identified was Summerhill. Now, Summerhill is close to where I live in Atlanta. Again, it's a Beltline neighborhood, and it's changed quite a bit as Georgia State University has taken over the old Turner Field where the Braves used to play. There's a lot of change happening in this area. A whole new Publix just went up. off Georgia Ave. There's tons of new high-end restaurants and shopping. So, this is a neighborhood in the heart of the city that is changing quite rapidly. We actually got a home under contract in Summerhill. Walkable to everything, really nice older home, pretty dense. The homes were close by, but unfortunately, we did end up terminating that deal because the seller would just not work with us, okay? Really silly things like the HVAC wasn't working and they would not address it, right? So, unfortunately, this does happen from time to time. Sometimes you just get sellers who are completely unrealistic, and we can't move a client into a home that's not in good condition, right? We cannot move clients into money pits. So unfortunately, we did have to terminate that deal. We were still open to the Summerhill area, but where did we finally land? Brookhaven. She actually purchased a home where she was renting, She liked Brookhaven a lot. The trade-off was just that your dollar's not going to go as far in a higher-end neighborhood like Brookhaven as it would in Summerhill. Okay, in Summerhill, she was looking at a much larger home that was really in the heart of things, whereas in Brookhaven is a smaller home. It's also an older home that probably needed, well, it certainly didn't need as much work as the Summerhill home, but it was more cosmetic work that it needed, which is fine, right? It's really all about the major systems being in good shape. But she was already very comfortable with this area, right? It was already going to work great for all the things that she liked to be close by to. The home maybe just needed a little bit more work cosmetically than the Summerhill home did, but the bones of it, the foundation, the systems were in great shape. And so she was able to pay $525,000 for essentially a starter home in Brookhaven, which is fantastic. I mean, you're talking about a neighborhood that is on the north side of town, close to Buckhead, close to a lot of high-end shopping and retail. It's got a great downtown area. It's on the north side of town, so you can head up north to other great neighborhoods like Alpharetta or Roswell really easily. But this is a very desirable area. The food is great in this part of town. It's very close to Buford Highway. So Brooke ended up making a great decision. She felt super comfortable in Brookhaven. It was just a matter of, is that house that I'm going to be able to get there going to work for me? And it did. So I don't only help transplants from other states, I also help locals as well. All right, next up, I have Tom and Matt. Now, Tom and Matt were another millennial couple. They were coming from Texas, no kids involved. They had a lot of flexibility, right? They were both remote workers, so they didn't have to commute anywhere. They wanted to be in town. They wanted to be inside the perimeter, and their budget was $375,000. So right there, that narrowed it down for us quite a bit. Now, it's still a decent starter home budget inside the perimeter. I would say, right now, just for reference, if you want to be ITP inside the perimeter, if you're going to be under 350, it's going to be a little challenging. If you need something detached, it's going to be something that's a little smaller or needs more work. But 350 and above is when you start to see more move-in ready things that don't need as much work. So they had a $375,000 budget. They needed at least a 3.2 at 1,200 square feet, but they had a lot of flexibility. So again, the big challenge here was narrowing it down. Now, as I said earlier, at this price point, 375 for folks that want to be ITP, in addition to the west side, the east side of town is one of the main places that we look. And we actually did end up finding a fantastic home for Matt and Tom in East Lake Terrace. It was $369,000. It was a 3.2 that was over 1,200 square feet, completely move-in ready, and really very much in town, right? Close to the East Lake Golf Course. They could go right down the street and be in Inman Park or Kirkwood within 10 minutes. It's also an area that's only going to be 15 minutes to the airport, right? So the east side, ITP, is one of my favorite places to look, sub $400,000. Especially if you're into ranches, you like one level, you like a little distance with your neighbors. Okay, the East Lake Terrace, East Lake, Belvedere Park, Gresham Park. Okay, there's pockets all over the east side where you're going to feel like you're in the suburbs. You're not even going to feel like you're inside the perimeter yet, but 15 minutes west and you're in downtown Atlanta. Okay, so things get more sprawling, less dense as you head east, and this is a great opportunity for people who want privacy or they want a larger lot. So Tom and Matt, very happy. East Lake Terrace, I think this is a great value buy for them. Safe area, no kids, so we're not too worried about public schools. But really good value here. There's a lot of development on this side of town, so I think there's going to be some great appreciation, and they have been super happy so far. All right, my final relocation client that I'm going to share with you today is the Brockets. Now, I love the Brockets. I've worked with them a few times now. They actually moved here from Louisiana, husband, wife, two teenage children, right? So the schools were super important. Safety was super important. But the wife worked at Emory, which is inside the perimeter on the east side of town. So that was our location anchor point. We had to be within about 35 minutes to Emory. So that really clarified things for us. So, and this is actually a fairly common one. We get a lot of people who, either go to Emory, work around the Emory area, and, they have children, so they need to be in the suburbs. So how do you be in the suburbs with an easy commute to the Emory area without breaking the bank? Okay, their budget when we purchased was $350,000. Now this one was actually a few years ago, so take this with a grain of salt. Prices have changed quite a bit, but we were looking at some of those neighborhoods that are just outside the perimeter to the east. So if you look on a map, these are neighborhoods like Stone Mountain, Clarkston, Redan. And what we really found with those neighborhoods is most of them weren't quite at the level of comfort and safety that they were looking for, having, 2 teenage children. So we landed on Tucker. And I'm a big fan of Tucker. I talk about it quite a bit, but this is a neighborhood just to the northeast, just outside the perimeter, that is a very reasonable commute for the wife. We're talking sub 35 minutes in most instances, and it's going to be a safe suburban environment. Now, Tucker's not known for its high quality public schools. This is actually unincorporated DeKalb County, but they're not bad. And Tucker itself is really growing quite sharply just because geographically where it sits close to so many other great neighborhoods with, good safety, easy access to the highways. And we can prove that because about 2.5 years later, we helped the Brockets sell their home in Tucker that they purchased for $325,000 for $465,000. So that was a great move all the way around for them. They eventually decided that they wanted to move further up north in the Sewanee area because she no longer had to commute to Emory. So they had more flexibility there. So we helped them buy for $325,000 and then sell 2.5 years later for $465,000. So that worked out great. They loved their time in Tucker. But if you're looking for one of those fringe suburbs, the suburbs that are just outside the perimeter, and you're working with a budget sub $500,000, Tucker is going to be one of the first places I talk about, along with areas like maybe Smyrna, Marietta, maybe a Sandy Springs or a Roswell, but those get a little bit more expensive. So even though, as you can see, the values in Tucker have risen quite a bit over the last few years, I do still think there's good value there, especially compared to some of the adjacent neighborhoods. So that purchase and sale ended up working great for the Brockets. So there you have it, a bunch of real life relocation clients, where they were coming from, what they were looking for, and where we eventually landed on the perfect neighborhood for them. As you can see, there are so many great neighborhoods in Metro Atlanta that will probably check all of your boxes. So it's really important you start with those 4 parameters that I gave you at the beginning of the video. And then at that point, you've got to talk with a professional who knows these areas, who can listen to what lifestyle you're looking for and help you identify 1 to 3 neighborhoods that are really going to deliver on that lifestyle that you're looking for. So I really hope you enjoyed that it helped kind of clarify things for you and gave you some ideas of where to look. Of course, this is what we do. So if you want to connect and talk about your relocation or home purchase journey, just book a call. You will talk directly with me. We'll hop on a Zoom call and talk about what you and your family are looking for. And I will take you through my patented process from A to Z to make sure that you absolutely love the neighborhood that you and your family live in. As always, thank you so much for watching. Please like and subscribe. And until my next video, I'll see you next time.